Hi everyone. So today I want to talk about another thing which I find just really irritating in the marvelous world of typology. And that is when people try to justify really bad socionics typings using the Enneagram. Right. So for people who don't really know what the Enneagram is, it's a sort of a new age theory of personality type. It has 9 types in it rather than socionics 16. And the main idea about it is that it's dealing with, well, negative drivers, you could say. It's comes from a very sort of um, negative place, from say areas where we experience fear, shame, or anger. And the idea is that these 3 by 3 types, these 9 types, they have different approaches to each of these 3 negative emotions. And the idea is that based on what these negative emotions are and how you approach these negative emotions, that's going to lead to all sorts of different behaviors, as it were, different ways of acting, different personalities. So, for instance, you may find that one type can become very aggressive, very dominant, because the way that it acts is about essentially when it experiences anger, it has to express the anger and bring that into the real world, whereas another type may be in denial about its anger, be actually quite sort of quite well agreeable, quite placating, as it were, of other people. So there's sort of differences between the different types, motivated by how they approach these negative drivers. In contrast, socionics, it's a theory of information metabolism, is about how information can be categorized into different forms and how different people metabolize these different kinds of informations in different ways. So you can see certain similarities there, that one is reacting to negative emotions, negative stimuli, the other one towards different kinds of information. But both sets of types are distinct from each other in terms of how they approach that thing, whether it's information or negative emotion, in very different ways. Another thing which Socionics covers is needs and aspirations. This is covered in the super id block. The idea of a mobilizing function, for instance, is meant to be an aspiration, something which you take great pride in, something which you want to work on and develop in yourself. Whereas a suggestive function is going to be an area of great need, it's going to be an area where, well, essentially you need something to be fulfilled and not quite able to bring that about yourself, causing a great deal of either discomfort or dissatisfaction. You will find also with socionics that there are areas where you feel pressures put upon you that you want to get away from. This is very clear in superego block. So socionics is full of these different drivers and motivations in a very sort of multi-layered way. So if it's the case that Enneagram deals with these fears, these negative emotions, these negative motivations, and socionics also deals with essential needs and one's motivations. It seems that these theories are similar enough that you could use, well, it's inevitable that there's going to be some sort of overlap. Now, a good way of seeing if there's this level of overlap is by looking at the descriptions which, say, the main website for Enneagram uses. I think their website I used was the Enneagram Institute. So what does the Enneagram Institute say about the different Enneagram types? Right. Type 1 is principled, purposeful, self-controlled, and perfectionistic. Or type 8 is self-confident, decisive, willful, and confrontational. Type 9 is receptive, reassuring, complacent, and resigned. And type 4 is expressive, dramatic, self-absorbed, and temperamental. So just reading through the different descriptions of different Enneagram types, you can already see them in terms of socionics. Type 1 seems quite LSI-ish, you could say. Whereas type 8 seems typically like an SCE or some other extrovert sensation type, an SLE. You look at 4, expressive, dramatic, self-absorbed, temperamental, you could see some sort of beta humanitarian. And type 9, receptive, reassuring, complacent, resigned, that sounds more like an introvert sensation type, perhaps an SCI. So looking at these different type descriptions for an Enneagram, they also let off certain signals, certain indicators that they like to also be applicable towards a socionics typing. So it seems very unlikely to me that there isn't overlap between socionics types and Enneagram types. And the difficulty with this, if you're trying to justify, say, a socionics type, which may be unusual, by using an Enneagram, well, you can't do that if there's overlap between different theories. You can only use one theory to explain difference in another theory if the two frameworks don't have this overlap. A good example of something which you could use, for instance, take sex, or take age, for instance. Now, you would find that two SLEs, they may act quite differently. If one, say, is a younger male, the other one's an older female. It makes sense that these are things which don't overlap with socionics. Whether you're male or female, you're still going to be metabolizing information. There's nothing necessary about being a man or being a woman that will affect how you affect what information you can metabolize. Same thing with age. So because there's no overlap, because they don't necessarily describe the same phenomena, you can't use gender to describe the socionics. You can't use age to describe the various phenomena of socionics. You can use that to then specify and clarify within a socionics type. With an Enneagram, it just becomes confusing with the overlap. Now, I'm not saying you can't possibly get certain odd combinations. It could be possible. I'm open to that possibility. But what I'm trying to say here is that you're going to have a very hard time making a good argument to justify such an odd combination. For instance, let's take an example. Let's take the IEI. Let's say you got someone who says they are an IEI, but also says that they are an 8 in an Enneagram. So a type in socionics which is very given towards self-reflection, very given towards a long-term focus, and very not given towards acting decisively. Tends to be very indecisive. But they are an 8, a type which is going to be, as said just above, decisive and confrontational. Well, and so I've encountered people who have made these claims about themselves, haven't necessarily believed them. But for this to work, you essentially need to show how being an 8 and having and having extrovert sensation are really very different things. You need to show how a type could theoretically be highly focused on extrovert sensation, but at the same time not be an 8, or have nothing to do with being an 8, and vice versa. Someone being an 8 and being not at all focused on extrovert sensation, or having it so weak in their system that it's basically a suggestive function. You'd have to set out those differences with a great deal of nuance. Now, I'm not an expert in the Enneagram. I like to think I know a lot about socionics. Wouldn't say I know that much about Enneagram, but I would be open to the idea of an expert demonstrating to me, for instance, how being an 8 and being extrovert sensation are significantly different, and drawing out those lines and limitations very carefully. Maybe we can negotiate what exactly those lines are, what those boundaries are. But I don't see that actually taking place when someone comes up to me and tells me that they are an IEI 8. Now, instead, what I see is that people who try to make this claim, if I challenge that claim, they end up revealing they don't know very much about socionics. The thing is that to justify any typing, you need to show how it works according to the information metabolism. You need to show how it works in Model A. So if you can't show how, according to the rules of what makes something extrovert sensation suggestive, if you can't show that for an IEI, then you don't have a good argument for an IEI typing. You don't have an IEI 8. You just have, well, probably maybe an EIE could work, maybe even an SLE if someone's very confused. But yeah, it becomes very difficult. You can't make that argument convincing. So that's really my thoughts on why you can't use Enneagram to justify non-socionics typing. You can try, it's not going to convince people. Anyway, hope you like that. I'm just going to end the stream now.